gotten rid of my agent, got rid of my first wife. I gave her everything. So I'm starting over from scratch. Just signed away everything in December.
What's happening to Chip Foose right now is honestly hard to watch. The man who once built legends is now struggling to hold his own together. For years, Chip Foose was unstoppable, the calm genius with a sketchbook and a dream. The guy who could take a wrecked car and turn it into art that moved people to tears. But lately, something feels off. The smiles look forced, the energy's fading, and fans are starting to ask what really happened to Chip Foose? Because behind the cameras, behind the fame, and behind the legacy, there's a story no one expected. A story of burnout, heartbreak, and a man quietly fighting to rebuild his life after losing almost everything that once defined him. His show disappeared, his marriage ended, his company changed, and now even his closest friends say he isn't the same. But why? What really broke the man who built his career on perfection? Stay till the end, because what's happening to Chip Foose right now might just be the hardest chapter of his life, and the truth behind it will shock you. Before the awards, before the cameras, before Overhaulin turned him into a household name, Chip Foose was just a quiet kid in Santa Barbara sketching dream cars on scrap paper. While other kids drew superheroes, he drew Mustangs, Chevelles, and wild futuristic shapes no one thought possible. His father, Sam Foose, ran a small custom shop, and that garage became Chip's classroom long before he ever set foot in college. Sam didn't just teach him how to weld or sand, he taught him patience. He'd say, "Anyone can bolt on parts, but only a few can build soul into steel." That line stuck with Chip for life. By his late teens, people in the local scene already knew his name. He wasn't loud or cocky, just relentlessly precise. Then came Lynn Cormos, the woman who would change everything. She saw his obsession not as madness, but as potential. While friends went partying, Chip stayed up till 3 a.m. perfecting renderings. Lynn was the one bringing him coffee and reminding him to breathe. Together, they started to dream bigger, a future where design wasn't just a job, but a legacy. After graduating from the Art Center College of Design, Chip landed a spot under the legendary Boyd Coddington, a name that dominated hot rod culture. Working under Boyd was brutal. Long hours, impossible standards, no room for mistakes. But it was also the ultimate test. Chip learned how to blend artistry with engineering, turning imagination into drivable perfection. Each project pushed him further, each car a silent promise that one day he'd have his own name on the shop door. By his early 30s, Foose had the respect of every serious builder in America, yet he still drove home in the same beat-up pickup he'd owned since college. He didn't chase fame, he chased the next design. But even then, success was slowly tightening its grip, because when your entire worth is built on perfection, the smallest crack can feel like failure. And that's where the story really begins, with a man on the brink of greatness, unaware that the very drive fueling his rise would one day test everything he loved. When Boyd Coddington's empire began to wobble in the late 90s, most designers panicked. Chip didn't. He looked at the chaos and saw a blank sheet of paper. With Lynn beside him, he took the biggest gamble of his life, walking away from the security of a famous shop to build his own from nothing. No investors, no corporate backing, just a two-car garage, a second mortgage, and a wife who believed in his sketches more than anyone else alive. Lynn handled the paperwork, the calls, the invoices. Chip handled everything that sparked, rattled, or rolled. The long nights, the fumes, the busted knuckles, they were building more than cars. They were building a future. Foose Design was born out of pure grit. Clients came one at a time, trusting the soft-spoken artist who didn't need to brag. Every completed project felt like a small miracle, and every payment went right back into the next build. Lynn kept the books balanced while raising their kids, Brock and Katie, sometimes answering calls with a baby on her hip. The marriage and the business became one machine, synchronized, efficient, but dangerously dependent on never slowing down. When the orders grew and awards followed, the pressure mounted. Deadlines tightened, expectations exploded, and Chip's calendar filled months in advance. There was no time to breathe, no room for failure. But that's the thing about success. It doesn't knock politely, it kicks the door open and never leaves. Chip's dream had finally become real, but it was about to demand more than he ever expected. Because behind every polished hot rod was a pair of tired hands, one designing the dream, the other trying to hold the family together. And soon, the balance they'd worked so hard to build would begin to tip. By 2004, Chip Foose wasn't just a designer, he was about to become a television icon. When TLC approached him with a wild concept, a show that could transform a beat-up car into a showstopper in a week, Chip almost said no. He was a builder, not a celebrity. But Lynn encouraged him to take the leap, saying, "If you don't tell your story, someone else will." And so, Overhaulin was born. From the first episode, it was clear Chip was different. He wasn't the loud, ego-driven type. He listened, he cared, he designed like he was building a memory for someone, not just a machine. Fans connected instantly. Letters poured in from around the world, people thanking him for making them believe in dreams again. Within months, he went from garage genius to mainstream hero. But with fame came a new kind of pressure. Cameras rolled 6 days a week, lights burned until midnight, and each build had to top the last. Chip would spend 14-hour days on set, then fly home to the shop for another 8 hours of design work. Sometimes he'd land at midnight, kiss his kids goodnight, and be back on a plane before sunrise. The schedule was relentless, and Lynn was left to keep both the business and their home running. For a while, it worked. The ratings soared, sponsors lined up, and Foose Design became a brand synonymous with excellence. But inside the family, the wear was showing. Chip missed birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet moments that used to keep them grounded. Every success came with a price tag he didn't see until it was too late. Lynn tried to hold it together running invoices, managing deadlines, keeping the house steady, but resentment slowly replaced admiration. Chip was everywhere except home, and the more the world celebrated him, the more isolated she felt. Even the kids noticed. Their dad was a hero on TV, but a ghost at the dinner table. Still, Chip pushed on because when you build your life around perfection, you don't know how to slow down. He told himself he was doing it for the family, for their future, but in reality, he was drifting away from the very people he was trying to protect. And that's the cruel thing about success. You can be on top of the world and still feel like you're falling apart. What began as a dream project had become a machine that never stopped spinning. And soon, the man who spent his life restoring others' dreams would realize his own was breaking beyond repair. At first, the Foose household still looked picture perfect from the outside trophies, magazine covers, smiling family photos at car shows. But behind the smiles, the cracks were deepening. Chip's days blurred into flights, filming schedules, and design deadlines. For every episode that went viral, there was a missed dinner, a canceled trip, or a broken promise waiting back home. Lynn, once his biggest supporter, had quietly become the anchor, keeping their world from drifting completely off course. She handled every invoice, every call, every angry vendor wondering where Chip was. When he wasn't home, she played both business partner and single parent, holding down a company that had grown too big to stop and a family that was growing tired of waiting. The hardest part? Chip didn't see it happening. He was too deep in the grind. To him, it was all temporary, just one more project, one more season, one more shoot. But one more never ended. Each time he promised to slow down, something bigger came along. Another sponsor deal, another dream build, another show. Lynn began to lose the husband she once recognized. Conversations about dreams turned into talks about deadlines. I love yous were replaced by reminders. Messages about missing each other turned into bullet lists about bills, shipments, and appearances. The emotional warmth that once powered their marriage was cooling into silence. Even the kids started to sense it. Brock and Katie adored their dad, but they mostly saw him through a screen, a public figure first, a parent second. Chip still tried to make it up when he could, taking them to car shows or letting them help in the shop, but it wasn't the same. The moments were there, but the connection was fading. And Lynn, the woman who once believed in his dreams more than he did, began asking herself a painful question. At what point does love stop being partnership and start becoming survival? Fame had given them everything they thought they wanted: stability, recognition, and success. But it also took away the one thing money can't replace: time. And that was the one thing Chip Foose could never design his way out of. Because while the world saw a man at the height of his career, those closest to him saw someone quietly running out of gas. Every build has a stress limit, push it too far, and something gives. For Chip and Lynn Foose, that moment came quietly, not in a screaming match or a public meltdown, but in the stillness between two people who had simply run out of words. By late 2018, friends close to the couple noticed something different. They no longer arrived together at events. Chip would show up smiling for cameras, while Lynn stayed behind to keep Foose Design running. They weren't fighting, at least not visibly, but the warmth that once made them inseparable was gone. In its place was professionalism. polite texts, brief check-ins, nothing more. Then, in 2019, the news broke quietly through the industry Lynn had filed for divorce. No headlines, no drama, just court papers and a stunned community asking, how did this happen? After nearly 30 years of partnership, both personal and professional, it was over. When Chip finally addressed it, his words hit like a wrench drop in an empty garage. I got rid of my first wife, and I gave her everything. I just signed away everything in December. I don't have a shop anymore, but I still have my tools. That wasn't bitterness, it was exhaustion. For a man who'd spent his life creating beauty from broken things, this time he couldn't fix it. He'd poured so much into his work that there was nothing left to hold his marriage together. Foose Design kept its name, but the heart of the company, the partnership that built it, was gone. Lynn stepped back completely, closing the door on the chapter they'd written together. And for Chip, it was like waking up in an empty workshop after the lights had gone out. He still had fame, he still had fans. But fame doesn't keep you warm when you're alone in the studio at 2 a.m. staring at a sketch that used to mean something. People saw the surface, the awards, the cars, the cameras, but they didn't see the toll, the late nights that turned into lost years, the success that cost him the one person who believed in him before anyone else. And when the dust settled, Chip Foose, the man who could rebuild anything, found himself standing in front of the one project he didn't know how to start over, his own life. When the dust finally settled, Chip Foose did what he'd always done after a wreck. He started cleaning up the shop. But this time, it wasn't metal he was trying to straighten out. It was life. The divorce hit harder than anyone realized. For decades, Chip's world had revolved around family, faith, and design, three things that always overlapped. Losing one cracked the other two. He stopped doing interviews for a while. The once booming Foose Design garage went quiet, and the man who once drew blueprints of other people's dreams suddenly had none for himself. His son Brock, now an adult, felt it the most. He'd grown up in the shadow of a famous father, cameras, fans, constant pressure. But when the headlines about the divorce surfaced, Brock made a choice his dad never could. He stepped out of the spotlight, deleted his social media, stopped showing up at events, and focused on finding his own identity. No cameras, no applause, just peace. Lynn, on the other hand, walked away with quiet grace. She didn't do interviews, didn't seek sympathy. She focused on rediscovering herself outside of the Foose Design name. For decades, she'd been the woman behind the brand now. She wanted to be more than that. Chip admitted that starting over in his 50s felt like losing control of a car he'd spent years fine-tuning. But he didn't crash, he coasted. Slowly, deliberately, learning how to enjoy silence again. He spent more time with his kids, more time sketching for himself instead of for TV. Weekends became sacred again, go-karting with Brock, pizza nights with Katie, small moments that never made it to camera but mattered more than any show. He also began speaking more about balance. At car shows and interviews, he didn't talk about horsepower or deadlines, he talked about burnout, about missing the small things, about why chasing perfection can destroy the people you love. For a man who had spent his whole career speaking through design, it was the most human he'd ever been. It wasn't redemption, it was recalibration. The rebuild wasn't about fame or reputation anymore, it was about learning that you can't weld love back together with work. Because sometimes, the real masterpiece isn't the car you restore, it's the life you manage to put back on the road. For most of his life, success meant motion, the hum of a welder, the roar of an engine, the next impossible build. But after everything fell apart, Chip Foose learned that sometimes the loudest breakthroughs happen in silence. The man who once juggled TV shoots, shop deadlines, and sleepless nights began saying one word that used to terrify him: no. No to overworking, no to constant travel. No to the projects that looked good on camera but hollowed him out inside. For the first time, Chip started designing on his own terms. He still showed up at car shows, but the energy was different, grounded, calm, almost humble. Fans noticed the change. The designer who once seemed superhuman now spoke like someone who had been through something real. When he talked about design, he talked about balance. When he talked about family, he talked about gratitude. And when he talked about failure, he didn't hide behind excuses, he owned it. Instead of chasing television fame, Chip focused on one-on-one builds, private commissions, charity projects, collaborations that reignited his creativity instead of draining it. He even began mentoring young designers, teaching them not just how to sketch or sculpt, but how to stay human in an industry that glorifies burnout. It was no longer about outdoing his past, it was about outgrowing it. The man who once designed cars to impress the world was now designing to inspire peace within himself. He admitted in an interview, "I used to measure success by how many cars I finished in a year. Now, I measure it by how many dinners I make it home for." That simple line hit harder than any TV finale. Because in a world obsessed with going faster, Chip Foose finally learned the power of slowing down. And for the first time in decades, he wasn't chasing perfection, he was living it. So, what do you think? Was it the pressure of fame, the collapse of a marriage, or just life catching up with one of the hardest working men in the industry? Whatever it was, one thing's clear, Chip Foose is still rebuilding. Not for views, not for fame, but for peace. If you found this story powerful, hit like for truth, subscribe for more real stories from the car world, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even legends have to rebuild sometimes. Because in the end, we're all a little like Chip Foose trying to restore what matters most before the final drive.